Nutrition is the one lifestyle pillar that can help any chronic disease, including mental health condition.
The gut is their second brain.
It really is. It has the second largest collection of neurons outside of the brain, and it is very effective in doing a lot of things, taking care of many functions: vitamin production, hormone production, sleep and circadian rhythm, immunity, mental health, fighting infections. So it's a hub of activity.
Hey everyone, before diving into the episode, I want to take a moment to invite you into our mindbodygreen ecosystem, where you can explore the infinite possibilities of health and well-being. All you have to do is click the subscribe button to hear more thought-provoking interviews with leaders in the health space. I am so grateful for all of you who have tuned in over the years, and let me tell you, it's only going to get better. So it's December 26th. Everyone is completely over the holidays, the sweets, the alcohol, the awkward uncle, and we are all ready to move on to 2024 and jumpstart our health and well-being routine. And so with that said, it's breakfast. I have to eat breakfast. I'm listening to this podcast in the morning. What is a nutritional psychiatry breakfast of champions look like? Let's start there. What should I eat right now?
So there are a few choices, Jason. I'm going to start with one of my favorites and easiest, which you've heard before, which is a chia pudding rich in protein and fiber. But you can add in hemp milk, or you can add in a nut milk of your choice, chop with some blueberries and some nuts or seeds. And that's a really power-packed breakfast that you can make ahead. If you consume eggs, pastured eggs with lots of veggies in them as an omelet or however you like it prepared, but load in those veggies, maybe even add some herbs and spices for the added boost. I also like to make frittatas ahead in a cupcake pan and make them as mini frittatas and freeze them so you can pop 4 out if you have a family of 4, and heat them or allow them to thaw overnight. And that's a really quick and easy, nutritious breakfast right there. If you need more than one, that's fine too, because you may be a little bit more hungry. But one of my favorites is also using tofu to make a scramble and adding in those veggies. So just like you would scramble egg, I take a block of tofu, I blitz a little bit in the food processor, have little chunks, and then stir fry that with onions and peppers and spinach and lots of spices, all of my favorites. And that way you're getting a nutritious breakfast right when you're starting the day. Always hydrate with water. I love coffee, and I understand you have made coffee now, Jason. I'm so excited to try it.
Oh, we got to send you some. Ping me your address after. We have to send you some.
It just arrived. So thank you.
Oh, amazing. Good.
But I was excited to see that because it's one of my favorite beverages. But then also hydrate with water, because when you get up in the morning, you're sort of dehydrated from the night before. And especially if you wake up with anxiety, it's super important to hydrate and make sure that you stay well hydrated throughout the day. So these are some ways to get started.
So you've got some great options. You've got options for those who consume eggs, for those who don't consume eggs. I'm curious, what makes all these options good? Is it the macros? Is there a specific combination of protein, carbs, sugar, and fat, or is it something else? Like, what makes these options so good?
I think that's a great question. And by the way, I also have a new recipe in Calm Your Mind with Food for a chickpea omelet made from chickpea flour. So it's just an additional plant-based protein, or for anyone who just has a flexible diet. It's nutritious and nutrient-dense for the brain because of the macros, the micros, the combination of ingredients. So if we take a step back and think about just a nutritional psychiatry plate, I want people to be plant-forward, irrespective of what your choice of proteins are. So these all are high in protein, or good sources of protein. They have fiber in them. By adding vegetables, we're adding all those plant polyphenols with a kaleidoscope of colors that make them more nutritious because of the number of not only antioxidants, but anti-inflammatory nutrients that they have. You're adding biodiversity to your gut. The spices and herbs are adding anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties plus flavor. You want something to taste delicious. So I would say that when we are having a plant-forward diet with a clean protein, some healthy fats, say a piece of avocado on the side with your omelet or whatever your choice of breakfast is, or that you've used a little bit of avocado oil. Those are your healthy fats covered. And then, you could have, if you consume toast, you can have a small piece of toast on the side as your grain. But remember, you're getting some carbohydrates from the vegetables that you are using in that. So I think that that's a balance from those perspectives, but it's also how I want people to think about their nutritional psychiatry calming plate.
So you mentioned grains. If you had to pick a grain to consume, is it sourdough? Is it rye? Is it none of the above?
One of my favorites, if I do eat bread, I try to get sourdough. And I say that because sourdough has a fermentation process by which it's made. And naturally, that fermentation process lowers the sugar. I also, Jason, will make the effort to get an artisanal loaf if I'm going to eat it because it's, baked fresh. So it lowers the chance of the number of preservatives. If you don't consume bread, there are sprouted options. I've seen some fascinating recipes for making a wrap that is gluten-free and grain-free from all sorts of ingredients. One was made from quinoa. Another was made from a different grain that was gluten-free. So there are options out there if you want to start to substitute certain foods in your diet. I just think we need to be flexible and honor kind of what our body is saying, right? So the body intelligent part of nutritional psychiatry, if gluten doesn't agree with you, then it's not for you. If it worsens your anxiety, you need to check whether you need to kind of eliminate it for a little while and see what's going on.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Listen to your body. And sometimes my body just screams for great organic sourdough with some grass-fed ghee and a little bit of pink Himalayan salt. And I just love it.
And it's super delicious, and I love it with a piece of avocado. If I can get it, get a really nice toasted piece. I love it. Love it with avocado and a drizzle of like microgreens, maybe a little bit of olive oil. So it's a great option.
So in the book, you have great recipes and you go into great detail on food. But for those who are in a rush right now, one, pick up the book. I encourage everyone to buy the book, Calm Your Mind with Food. But like if you were to just like think of a handful of items that should be on anyone's grocery list if they're looking to put together a brief list, what are some items in your opinion?
Sure. So I have a whole shopping list in the book, but I've pulled some of the foods from there so that people have a quick mnemonic to remember things when they're in the supermarket, and I call it CALMS. So each one has a few different things. If you don't remember all, that's okay. We just want you to try to hit some high points here. Remember, when you're shopping in the supermarket, we want you to think about loading up with those colorful veggies, some berries, then get all of your proteins, the things that you enjoy eating. In the center aisles offer you beans, legumes, canned salmon, canned mussels, canned oysters, rich sources of omega-3s, but also those hearty lentils, beans that can be cooked, that are cost-effective, but also a good source of protein. Now, if we were to just think about specific nutrients from all of that, C is for choline. Choline is from eggs, but you also get it from beans and lentils. The other C is for vitamin C, extremely important in several biochemical reactions. So get, by the way, some of the best sources of vitamin C are kiwi fruit and red bell peppers, not just citrus fruit. Another one is extra dark natural chocolate because it's one of the best sources of plant-based iron. And it turns out that a lot of women and children are deficient in iron. And when deficient in iron, this often drives anxiety. So just making sure that your iron levels are okay is important. You can actually get that from chocolate. And here's the kicker. The vitamin C from a piece of orange or clementine actually helps the absorption. So that's a good pairing right there. And the last C that I include is chickpeas because it's a great source of tryptophan for your body. The A is for antioxidants and ashwagandha. And the reason I want to bring ashwagandha to people's attention, Jason, is because it has a good amount of evidence for calming the mind. And it's actually a decent choice for people to actually embrace and try. It doesn't taste good. Trust me, I tasted it as a child. But it's fine as a supplement and think about it that way. And the other A is for anthocyanins. And think of the beautiful color of blueberries. Well, it's anthocyanins that, give it that hue, but this is also a great nutrient for your brain and for calming. The L, believe it or not, is for liquids because people who are not drinking enough water can be dehydrated, but also appear more anxious. I've even seen panic be precipitated by being severely dehydrated. So just making sure that you're sipping on water throughout the day. That other great teas to try are green tea, passion flower tea. Sort of expand your repertoire of teas, and that's what I've done in the book. Offered people a few more options, but make sure you have enough liquids. And M is for more omega-3s. We know that wild-caught salmon, those fatty fish, your chia seeds and flax seeds are really important for our brain and body, but they're really important for our gut, and they're super helpful for calming. And then S is for spices. So it's an easy breakdown of things you can just try to remember to always have in your cart, or as many as you remember to place in your cart to get you started on that anti-anxiety shopping trip.
So the title of the book is Calm Your Mind with Food. And you're an expert in this super exciting field of nutritional psychiatry, the gut-brain connection, the food-mood connection. If we zoom back out, what I think is so exciting is we weren't talking about this a decade or so ago, and we've got a mental health crisis. A lot of people struggle with anxiety. In your view, how much of our issues here can be solved or at least helped with nutrition?
Nutrition is the one pillar, lifestyle pillar, that can help any chronic disease, including mental health conditions. And it is the one thing that we're all ignoring. I say that very broadly because it's not really part of our medical system or integrated in the way it should or could be. But nutrition is a massive driver in terms of helping to prevent or improve disease. So children who were, for example, shown to be malnourished, when a study was done and they were fed a healthy whole foods diet, there was an improvement in their memory, their attention, and all of their brain development started to improve because we know that we have neuroplasticity. That gives us hope that, say, we're not eating a great diet, can we pivot and start to eat healthier foods as part of that diet? It doesn't have to be perfect. The other piece is that there's a growing level of evidence behind different conditions in mental health that can be helped with food. And some people will say, oh, well, it's just if you're eating healthy, you're going to feel good. I think that's true to only up to a certain point, because there are now greater nuances in the research. We are understanding that there are microbes in the gut, certain species that actually help anxiety. Some of them interact with GABA receptors. Some of them interact with serotonin and dopamine. So there's a lot more science coming forward. And you're absolutely right, Jason. It wasn't there 10 years ago. This is newer stuff. So there's a lot more hope that nutrition can help with our mental well-being. And I think that people just need to try to even change one habit at a time that can move them along a continuum towards a healthy diet.
The gut is their second brain.
It is our second brain. It really is. It has the second largest collection of neurons outside of the brain, and it is very effective in doing a lot of things, taking care of many functions: vitamin production, hormone production, sleep, and circadian rhythm. Circadian rhythm being our internal body clock. Immunity. 70% of our immune system is in the gut. Mental health, fighting infections, all of this stuff. So it's a hub of activity. And part of it, is we need to take care of that gut. If someone comes over to stay in your home, you wouldn't just kind of leave them wandering around on their own and not give them a place to sleep or feed or give them a glass of water or a meal. If they come to visit you and they're a guest, you will take care of them. Well, the microbes are really part of our body, and we need to be taking care of them. And one of the way that we can do that is through how we eat, giving them the biodiversity of plants, giving them all these nutrients and fiber that they really need to thrive.
And, I'll never forget when I first met Dr. Frank Lipman, who's my personal doctor. He had a philosophy around treating patients. And it was, if you can't figure out what's wrong, treat the gut. And that stuck with me. And as I think about nutritional psychiatry, and look, there's a lot of trauma, big T and little t. There's a lot of anxiety, and some of it can be dramatically improved through therapy, through medication. But sometimes none of the above works. Exercise and other lots of modalities, exercise, meditation, mindfulness, a lot of lifestyle modifications. Sometimes those work, sometimes they don't. But the most powerful one often is nutrition, food. Figure out what's going on in the microbiome.
Yes, exactly. And so, I think that these are the things that we very often, Dr. Lipman is one of those real sort of foundational doctors who's been using nutrition as a pillar for quite some time. So I think that we need to spread that message. More of us need to be doing it, and certainly in the educational programming that I've started to create over the last several years, I've been trying to do that so that we have more healthcare practitioners trained in this area. I think it's just all important.
So I think there's consensus among the health forward camp that consuming too much sugar is probably not good. I think there's consensus there. And you see a lot of people experimenting with CGMs, the continuum glucose monitors, and there's a lot of insights there. And in your view, what role does blood sugar balance play in our mood, in our brain health, in our mental health?
It's actually much more significant as I've looked deep into the research, seen this clinically, and seen it, especially in my practice. It turns out that one of the things in Calm Your Mind with food that I really started to put together is metabolism and anxiety. So blood sugar is actually extremely important in terms of not just developing type 2 diabetes. It's actually also important for our mental health because there are areas of the brain that are hotbeds for anxiety, like the amygdala and the hippocampus, but these are also regions of the brain that deal with metabolism. So if your metabolism is impaired or out of whack, and many Americans are metabolically unfit, research has shown that it tips the anxiety. And we know from COVID that following COVID, a study was published in Lancet showing that anxiety is increased by 25%. And it seems to echo what a lot of us are feeling and seeing just in our peers, our friends, our family, and in the world. So one of the reasons that blood glucose is so critically important is because by managing it in a better way, by the choice of carbohydrates that you eat, by the choice of where you get your sugar from. Berries are very different from, teaspoons of sugar in coffee or beverage or soda. That becomes critically important. And that balance becomes key as part of more of a whole foods diet.
I'm not advocating for a complete embracement of the carnivore diet. I do think it works for some people, but is this why carnivore works so well for those, struggling with anxiety and autoimmune? Because you're completely eliminating sugar, basically, if you're carnivore diet.
My view on my view on the different diets, whether it be carnivore or plant-based, is that they work differently for different people. And that is really because the gut microbiome is unique. I think that an element of why the carnivore diet works for those individuals is they may be super sensitive to sugar. And by eliminating it from all refined sources, because they have to be getting sugar from some source, but by removing all the refined sugars, they're definitely probably helping to heal maybe inflammation in their body, help heal their gut and improve, but they then thrive in that. I just feel, Jason, that exclusion of an entire food group is tough for me to believe because I don't think it's sustainable, and I've seen it not be sustainable. So good luck to the folks who are doing well with that. But I'd much rather my patients say, look at that plate and say, look, I'm going to cut way back. You remember how the food pyramid used to be? So we're not going to, fill our plate with rice and pasta. We're actually going to have a small side of that, but really fill it with the vegetables, the healthy fats, and the protein. And I think just those types of interventions have worked for my patients, like a clean keto diet have worked for a short period of time. And then they start to incorporate more whole foods and not be as, we do therapeutic carbohydrate reduction. And they can start to eat more carbs again, but they don't necessarily go back to a full pasta dinner. Their bodies have adjusted and they eat small portions of whole grains, but they feel more metabolically flexible by that point. And I think that's an important differentiator between the different diets too.
Agreed. I think it's a great reset for some people, but not a sustainable lifestyle.
Exactly. Although many people are living that way, but I don't think for my patients that it's been sustainable.
So you mentioned iron deficiency is something to look out for. For those who do lab work, which I'm assuming is probably a lot of our listeners, what should they look out for in terms of deficiencies or maybe over-indexing in the wrong way as a clue that, maybe I'm not optimizing my diet for my mental health? What else should they look for in those labs?
So they should definitely have an iron panel done by their doctors because different doctors will look at it differently, but it's usually iron FIT and TIBC. And the doctors can interpret that for them. But they might be feeling weak, tired, just almost a sense of malaise, not having the energy that they're used to. And they may actually be developing or have developed iron deficiency anemia. Like I said, it's very common. So I'm always a test, don't guess kind of person because we want to make sure we're replenishing the right nutrient. So if you got that panel, you can also ask your doctor to check your metabolites, your electrolytes, and also check things like vitamin D, right? Because in the far northeast, a lot of people may be vitamin D deficient. So get a panel, have them checked, and then you work with your doctor because if it's not too low, you might be able to start with consuming food. But if you're vegetarian, you have to maybe supplement that because you may not get enough heme iron from red meat and other forms of meat, but you can get it from some plants. So that's a good way to start. And you remember, you can just always be tweaking your diet in the right direction anyway. But what the blood test will tell you is, do you need to also supplement? Or if you're going to try diet, is your doctor going to be comfortable checking your level in a few months and saying, we don't need to have you supplement. And also, it will be based on the symptoms you have.
Why do you think so many people are suffering from iron deficiency?
I think it's the food system. So with women of childbearing age, it's multiple things, including menstruation and other things. It also, I think, where I'll tell you what made me feel concerned that it was diet and nutrition is that it's so high in children. And it's always harder. Many kids do eat nutritiously, but it's harder to get kids to eat just fully nutritious whole foods, and they're so used to snacks and juice boxes in school and things like that. So it to me, I do feel like it's the food system and how we are almost nutritionally deficient. And that's why a lot of foods are fortified, but then they fortify the cereals. And that just, just doesn't quite kind of make sense to me.
So why is that so bad? Is it because it's so ultra processed, or is it the fortification or like the enrichment of the flour? Is it all of the above? How do you think about
Sure. So the way I think about it is that, the reason we fortify foods is these things are not in our nutrition. Why aren't they in our nutrition? They actually should and could be because for the most part, of course, there's hunger in America and there are food deserts and all of that. But for the most part, people have access to whole foods. My issue with fortifying cereals is that cereal isn't really a real food. And it's a highly processed, extruded, if you've ever seen the way cereals are made, extruded, changed into the shape, and often the labeling is very tricky on cereals because things like whole grain may have a very tiny percent of actual grain in them. So my feeling about fortifying those things is that it's just a marketing gimmick to help us eat nutritiously, but actually it's not good nutrition. So that's my issue with that. But when people fortify, nut milks and things like that, that's actually where we can get some extra nutrition. I'm totally okay with that because none of us eats a perfect diet, so we may in fact have these deficiencies here or there.
So you mentioned nut milks, and there are some super clean nut milks like Malk, my favorite brand, and then there are some that are not so clean, and they have seed oils, and a lot of people don't like seed oils these days.
To watch for that, yeah, that's a big issue.
Yeah, what's your take on seed oils and how they relate to our gut-brain connection?
So here's the deal with seed oils. They are ultra processed. I think that, from what the data has told us, they are largely pro-inflammatory for the body. But that doesn't mean, for example, in culinary school, we'd use a tiny bit of hazelnut or walnut oil to finish a salad. And it's a really delicious flavor. If you have a teaspoon or a little bit to as part of a dish, it's very different from that being your main source of fat and cooking, your cooking fat for everything that you do. Right. So I think that I'm much more concerned about the processed vegetable oils, the processed soybean oils, the vegetable oils that are labeled vegetable, and you think, oh, this is from a vegetable, but actually largely soy, and then the processed corn oils as well. So I would just say, have less of them. Make your primary fats for cooking be avocado oil, extra virgin olive oil for your salad dressings. I like ghee. Culturally I grew up eating ghee. I use a little bit in my food. I love a little bit of butter, a little bit of coconut oil. So I mix it up, but I don't use a massive amount of any one of them.
So you mentioned coconut oil, and I think coconut oil is a little bit controversial around how it relates to cardiovascular health. There's coconut oil, there's coconut milk, there's coconut water, there's coconuts. They're all different.
There's coconuts, everything.
Yeah, coconut water, as long as it's pure coconut water, I don't think people are concerned with regards to cardiovascular health. But I do hear people go back and forth on coconut oil and sometimes coconut milk. What's your take on coconut oil and coconut milk?
So a lot of cardiologists, well, many cardiologists that I speak to don't really buy into the revised thinking around saturated fats. And a very major study was completed at the beginning of 2020 that really helped me to revisit and rethink my position on this as well. But I will tell you that cardiologists I speak to don't necessarily agree. And so they don't necessarily support coconut oil. They don't necessarily think we could eat a clean piece of beef more often or use butter when we cook. And I think it's a difference of opinion. I think there's a lot of good science there to show that a little bit of some of these products is okay. And the reason I talk about moderation, Jason, it's because most people eat these things. So I'd rather they understand you can eat it, but just don't have it every day for every single meal. But it's not completely unhealthy. That doesn't mean that the medical professionals all agree on it, because they don't. Many cardiologists will say, stay away from these.
And what the study you reference, it seems like the tide is turning in that, say 5 years ago, many cardiologists would say avoid saturated fats like coconut oil, but it seems like more moving toward this philosophy that, you know what, it's maybe not the sat fat that's contributing to CVD in the form of coconut oil. And so that is interesting, and I think we're all paying attention to.
The article was one of the most cited in that journal, JACC, in 2020. So I do think more people should look at it. And I actually mentioned it in my book. I feel like many of the doctors that I speak to really are not on board with this. I want to be very transparent about that. But there are also a group of individuals who believe it and stand by it. And I think it's fair that there's some disagreement over it.
And why I segue to cardiovascular disease, CVD, is because people will often say what's good for the heart is good for the brain and vice versa.
Mm-hmm. This is true. But I think that, we have to add in a few more things. Firstly, we need to understand that despite COVID and everything else that's happened, the number one killer of Americans is cardiovascular disease. So it's important to tweak our diets work with the right professional to help you do that, because each of our diets is unique. We all eat different foods, but we also, I think, have to extend that what's good for the gut is good for the brain, because we know about the gut-brain connection, and include the heart in that. I think that the more times, we live in a country that has highly specialized medicine. And on the one hand, it's great to have access to that type of medical care. But the truth is it ends up being very siloed. So, the gut, brain, and heart are all in the same body, and they all really are connected. And I think the more times we make those linkages, the better that we are going to be able to handle our overall health.
Yes. And so, with regards to our overall health, a lot of people have tools in their toolkit when they're, maybe stressed or struggling with anxiety. And often those tools look like something like, all right, I need to do yoga, or I need to meditate, or do a little breath work, or go for a walk. And so, within that toolkit, if someone's like in the moment and they say, all right, I need to take care of myself here, what can they incorporate with regards to diet? Is it, I need to go for a sardines break, or I need to hydrate? Like, how do you think about food? What should be part of that toolkit when someone's struggling?
I like that. Sometimes when people feel that anxious, they can't eat. But I often try to encourage them to drink something. And drinking water, drinking a green tea, drinking a calming passion flower tea can be very helpful for a little bit of a reset in the body and in the mind. But in terms of foods, although those foods don't act immediately, by really packing in the nutrients that feed the brain, maybe it's a sardine snack, maybe it's some nuts and seeds, maybe it's extra dark natural chocolate and a piece of clementine. I think if you're going to go for foods that are going to actually nourish your brain, try out those types of snacks versus, the vending machine or the candy bar or the very special coffee drink with a ton of added creams and a ton of sugar. Sometimes a small size of those, can have up to 57 grams of sugar in them. So beware of those coffee drinks because you can actually check it out on the apps. Beware of those because those are just loading. We know about sugar, so I'm not going to go through that, but we know that that's driving it the wrong direction. So your snacks on hand should be, a piece of fresh fruit, even a piece of hard cheese, nuts, seeds, a bit of dark chocolate, maybe a little. There's some really great sardine snacks now that they keep. They have little pouches of little different types of seafood that are really sustainable and that you can eat on the go if you're traveling and things like that. These are good options for people.
I love my wild sardines.
Yeah.
They're just so nutrient dense, 20 grams of protein. My wife Colleen doesn't like them. My kids look at me like I'm strange. But I Not for everybody, but they work for me. You mentioned fruits, and we've talked about blood sugar. And, look, there are some fruits that spike blood sugar. Bananas, for example. If you're wearing a CGM and you have a banana, it's probably going to spike. How do you think about fruits and fructose? And how would you rank the best fruits? And I hate to say the worst fruits because I don't believe in demonizing fruits. Like, I have bananas. I like bananas. But how do you think about that?
Yeah, exactly. So let's just start with the fact that you like bananas, right? You also are pretty fit, Jason, and I'm guessing don't have or have improved your metabolic health over time. So the way that your body responds to banana, even if it does spike, it's going to be a little bit different because your body, through exercise and other means, is going to be able to metabolize that. And even if you have that spike, your body will recover from it. That's very different from someone who's having weight issues or is struggling with metabolic issues. The bananas can respond differently in their body. And so they may need to be a little bit more careful. My favorite fruit are berries of different colors because of where they are in terms of they are providing sugar, but they're natural source. But my guidance around fruit is eat a couple of servings of fruit a day. I like berries and I like things like clementines or apples. For me, those are great snacks. But by all means, enjoy different types of fruit. Just have them in moderation and making sure that you do have them. But if you're worried about your blood sugar, go for the berries, go for clementine, go for an apple. You can even have half an apple as your snack and have the other half the next day. You can do lots of things with it. Remember that a piece of actual fruit is very different from juicing a fruit and putting it in a smoothie because if you have eating a quarter cup of blueberries, it'll take you maybe 5 minutes. You're chewing, you're paying attention, you're swallowing it, and it's full of the fiber and the nutrients. But when you take the same amount of blueberries and you juice them in your smoothie, it hits your bloodstream much faster. It hits your bloodstream in seconds. So the impact is different. So my suggestion around that is it doesn't mean you never put berries in your smoothie. Just don't do it every single day. Try to eat them whole, and once in a while, add them into your smoothie. But mostly, you're going to get the fiber and the nutrients much better if you just eat them.
Interesting. And so, How do we incorporate all of this into our life if we're health forward without quickly going down the orthorexia rabbit hole, you know, which I see a lot of people go through, and sometimes it happens slowly and sometimes it happens fast, and it's unfortunate.
It is unfortunate. And one of the things I have to always be mindful of in nutritional psychiatry in general is that people have to at least have a basic healthy relationship with food in order to use these principles. Because if they have orthorexia and they are fixated on a certain healthy habit, they it's very hard to actually help them adjust to a more wholesome food diet that is still healthy, and it can be quite problematic. So, some of the things to avoid that are, like you just said a few minutes ago, not demonizing food, not demonizing a certain food group. You may not like bananas. Maybe you don't like to eat a certain type of grain. Maybe you prefer not to eat bread, or you don't like fish. Whatever it is, create the more personalized plan for what works for you, and do it in small increments, because this is a marathon and not a sprint. It's very, I did create an anti anxiety shopping list, and it's really a list that you can check off what you want to buy. But it gives you in one place things that are going to help calm your mind. It's not intended to overwhelm you, that you think, oh my God, these are so many ingredients. What am I going to do? It comes with a protocol, and then it comes with recipes. So it walks you through. Let me just take one day at a time. Let me just get the ingredients for this day and try them out this week. You can do it in a very flexible way. I think that where people get into trouble or go down a rabbit hole that's not healthy is they get fixated on they have to do a certain thing, and they get very um, almost judgmental of themselves and very regretful if they say took their kids to a birthday party and someone offered them a piece of cake or a cupcake. They get very regretful if they're running through an airport late at night and the only thing open was a fast food place and they hadn't eaten. These things happen. It's life. And I think what we need to do is just correct at the next meal and not live in judgment of ourselves, because that's another thing that just pushes us in all sorts of emotional directions. And then the psychology around our eating gets warped, and we kind of are thrown off track.
Yes. And I think specifically to the health forward bunch, if you go on Instagram, there seems to be a herd mentality sometimes where, there's one food or superfood or supplement or mineral, and then all of a sudden everyone's talking about it. Next thing you know, maybe we're consuming way too much of it. In your view, is there something you're seeing on social media where everyone in the health forward bunch seems to be on board with it and consuming a ton of it, and you're like, I don't know about that. Maybe they're overdoing it. Maybe you probably shouldn't have, 3 gallons of oat milk a day or whatever it might be.
Well, I don't know. Right now, I have to say, I don't know if I've noticed any particular trend, because what I do notice, Jason, is a lot of um, sort of divisive behavior on social media, where it's, you should only eat this food group and you shouldn't eat that, and a lot of, which doesn't appeal to me, demonizing a certain food group. And I think that's when people get confused. So I haven't seen a specific health trend. I know, I'll tell you a funny one though. I was asked to comment for a newspaper about hydration. I jumped on it. I was like, great, I can tell people how when you're dehydrated, you feel anxious, because, all of us are feeling anxious. No, the article was about TikTokers who were encouraging each other to drink water. So they were getting 40-ounce, not a bad thing, 40-ounce containers and filling it with water. But what were they doing to drink the water? They were adding Skittles powder and other candy. I'm serious. I did not know Skittles powder existed, but apparently there are these little powders you can add to water. And so I was asked to comment on on the story. And what I guess it taught me is that you just never know what's going to take off, and how that can be so misguided, right? Because the water is fine. Have a 1 or 2 Skittles from a bag on occasion, that happens.
Liquid diabetes.
But exactly, but powder it and put it in your water to drink it. So it's all of this type of stuff that does get truly misguided. And then there are also the experts who, in their very strong opinions, sometimes can be very dogmatic and I think very confusing to people.
So on the subject of hydration, there are lots of different opinions on how much water is enough. And then you see many experts say, well, it's not about how much water, it's about electrolytes, and you need electrolytes, you need potassium, you need your sodium. So focus on that and not the quantity of water. What's your take on hydration?
So I think electrolytes are good in moderation. I think that if you're someone who's exercising, is out, living in a climate that's very hot, where you're perspiring more, you may be exposed to the sun, in swimming a lot, doing outdoor sport, electrolytes may be more important just to keep that balance. But any one of us could do well with a little bit of electrolytes. But here's where I'm cautious about it. I don't like to say just put in a packet of electrolytes in your water every day, because these are actually they are very serious. The electrolytes are serious components of your body. They deal with an abnormal electrolyte panel can lead to arrhythmias. So I don't want people to just say, sure, I'm just going to put all of that in my water and that's what I'm going to drink. Electrolytes are definitely important. I would rather you hydrate well with plain water, maybe flavor with berries and citrus fruit. And if you feeling that, you are sweating a lot, you may be exercising, you may be preparing for a marathon, those electrolytes could be super important to you.
Do you have a recommended baseline in terms of one's body weight
For
hydration? Like half your weight?
Yeah, I've heard that, and I think it works for a lot of people. 6 to 8 glasses, a certain number of mils or ounces per person. Mostly, what I ask people to do is get approximately 16 ounce. In the United States, a 16 ounce water bottle that's sustainable, and just keep refilling it at least 4 times. That gives you at least 64 ounces. No, I must have doing that, but yeah. So in other words, just fill it a few times so that you are hydrated throughout the day. And this is another thing where people can overhydrate, right? So you just want to give some guidance around that. That's why I usually say 16 ounce bottle, because a lot of water comes in that kind of size. People tend to know that in the US, and then refill it a few times.
I'll do around. I'm glad you mentioned how active you are and weather, because something I found very hot affects me, but also, well, I don't experience this anymore because I live in Miami, but very cold. If you're in very cold weather, that's also dehydrating, and most people aren't aware of that.
That's absolutely correct. In cold, hypothermia is a whole other thing. And so keeping hydrated, making sure that we're not, in extremely cold, I spent a very large part of my life in Boston. When it's that cold, you actually have to make sure you're not losing heat from, your head, your face, and things like that. It can be very extreme.
So let's pretend you could wave your magic wand and get funding for any study you could dream of. And so time, resources, doesn't matter. What study would you do?
What I'm most interested in studying is the ongoing development of psychobiotics. So really using food to improve mental well-being. And if there was a way to, there is ongoing research, but I would love to really dive deeper into that and find ways that we can hone in on being a little bit more prescriptive about the concepts in mental health. So, if you have this condition, we know some things like, for example, the types of different bacteria that are involved in certain targets of anxiety. We know that lactobacillus rhamnosus targets anxiety through GABA. We know that lactobacillus reuteri diminishes anxiety-like behaviors. We know that lactobacillus helveticus reduces cortisol levels while exhibiting anti-anxiety effects. So I would love to, specifically for me in anxiety and mood disorders, which I see the most of, really dive deep into how can we use food, to really become these interventions in a way.
Could you repeat those strains? Could you repeat those strains again? Because I want to make sure we get them in the show notes. I'm sure people are writing them down as they listen.
Sure. The first one is lactobacillus rhamnosus, which targets anxiety through GABA receptors. Then I think I mentioned lactobacillus reuteri, which diminishes anxiety-like behaviors. There are like 7 or 8, but I'll mention these 3. Then there's lactobacillus helveticus, which reduces cortisol levels, therefore helping with anti-anxiety effects.
And for those three specifically, are they found in any foods?
So the study that this was done in actually looked at fermented dairy products and pickled foods that were rich in certain of these probiotics, and it was a study published in Frontiers of Nutrition. So I think the way to think about it is, if you're looking for a supplement, try to make sure maybe you're looking for those, or try it in fermented foods just form such a great basis for improvement of our gut health, and they have live active cultures in them. So choosing a few fermented foods and eating them regularly and noticing how you feel might be important. But that's exactly why I want to do this kind of research. So
I love it. So essentially, like a grass-fed yogurt or grass-fed kefir or sauerkraut.
a sauerkraut, or some type of your favorite pickled foods, something. At least start there, because we know the microbes that have these effects, and we want to see where they are. A lot of time people get a supplement, but I just want them to try food first.
Always got to go food first. Food is medicine. Start there. And then you'll probably end up supplementing anyway, but start with food and see how far you can go. We covered a lot of ground today, other than pick up the book, which I encourage everyone to do. I'll hold it up for those watching on YouTube. What else would you like to leave our audience with in terms of words of wisdom, or is there anything else we did not cover that you'd like to cover?
I wanted to mention that I spent a lot of time testing the recipes that I added to include anxiety busting ingredients, but I also took the Mediterranean diet and I added in Asian flavors, so that you could tap into vegetables from other regions and spices from other regions to kind of expand our palate and make it more delicious. And the recipes are flexible for whether you add chicken or you add tofu or whatever it is that you eat. And I feel like the message I want to leave people with is, we're at such a juncture in time with so much going on. Please just remember that you do have the power at the end of your fork to feel better and to help calm your mind. There is a way forward. And I think that, if you're interested, pick up my newsletter at umanaidoomd.com. Look at the book, try the protocol. I'd love to hear what people think about it. It's really meant to be a guide that you can walk through on your own. That's practical. Maybe you're waiting to see a therapist. Maybe you haven't decided to see a mental health professional, but you want to try to feel better on your own. It's really intended to fill that niche gap of helping people, because we know from research that 70% of individuals never see a mental health professional.
Wow. Uma, thank you so much for your incredible work. Congrats on the book, and always a pleasure.
Thanks so much, Jason. Always great to talk to you. I appreciate it.